What do you get when you cross one part Harry Potter, one part Aragon, and one part Name of the Wind, make shamanism the magic system, and then marinate it in Chinese history? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Poppy Wars. So, this is the Poppy War Trilogy by RF Kuang. See the book. It's a female led epic fantasy that takes place over three books, which, trust me, are page turners. The story starts relatively innocently compared to the rest of the series, with Fang Rinin, you can call her Rin, who's a teenager who lives in the southern poor province, the Rooster province, inside of the Nakara Empire. Rin lives a life largely of servitude to her adoptive parents, but has a huge turn of fortune after she passes a nationwide aptitude test called the Keiju and gets accepted to the prestigious military academy to the north, Sinigard. If this sounds like Hogwarts to you, don't worry, you're not alone, and I'll cover that a little bit later. Before long, Rin discovers that while her skin color, poverty, and gender are all obstacles to overcome in the eyes of her classmates, she has a connection to the gods that's exceedingly rare. She is what's known as a shaman, and this makes her not just a better fighter, but an extremely valuable military asset to the Nakara Empire. And this is soon put to the test. About halfway through book one, there's a massive tonal shift. We go from this like young adult academy setting to a full-blown military campaign, which spans the remaining 2.5 books of the trilogy. At this point, the series can be summed up largely in that Rin has to manage tentative alliances, medicate her shamanism with opium, slake her desire for revenge, and keep her few friends safe. All the while, she's dealing with invading forces from beyond the borders of Nakara and all of the fun twists and turns that brings with it. So first up, let's talk about the historical context of the Poppy Wars. This is a trilogy that is dripping in historical references, and the author RF Kuang has said in multiple interviews that the second Sino-Japanese War fought between China and Japan in the late 30s and 40s in the 20th century was a huge influence in the relationship between the Nakara Empire and the Mugen Federation. While the atrocities of the Second Sino-Japanese War weren't widely discussed in the US until the late 80s and 90s, Kuang paints a really vivid picture of what they were like through this trilogy. And it should help the reader to understand just how bad this total war was in Asia during the period where we were at World War II in the US. One of the most striking scenes in the book, and spoiler alert here in case you haven't read the trilogy yet, is Rin walking through the wreckage of Golan Nis after the Mugen Federation sacks the city. Corpses are desecrated, women and children have been raped, buildings have been hollowed out by bombs and biological weapons. This is one of the grimmest pictures I've ever seen painted in a fantasy book. And just in case you missed the last comment, like this is all based on a real war that happened between China and Japan, which, at least in my perspective, got glossed over during my curriculum when I was in high school and middle school. The goal in this chapter specifically is based off of the rape of Nanking, which maybe you've heard about in history classes. This book puts it very, very poignantly just how bad this conflict was. So there are other references in this trilogy beyond the Second Sino-Japanese War, but some of the other ones include parallels to Mao Zedong, Chiang Kai-shek, and if you want to do a little more reading on the topic, I will link to a blog post by Read by Tiffany, who gives a really excellent summary of all of the historical mythological references from East Asian culture that are prevalent in the Poppy War trilogy. Now let's talk about the magic system, shamanism. I'll try to avoid spoilers as much as possible here, but, be warned. I loved the way that the gods are depicted in this book. I think probably it's one of my favorite magic systems that I've read in any fantasy book. Basically, the gods are forces of emotion, which cannot manifest in the physical world, outside of their ability to influence humans who have called upon their power. And these powers are pretty neat. We see hypnosis and mind control. We see pyrokinesis. We see command of plague and blighting other humans. Super strength, warging, similar to what Bran does in the Song of Ice and Fire. The powers are very cool when they are on display in this trilogy. Also devastating, but also cool. While the number of gods is mentioned multiple times, I think it's something like 64. One of my biggest complaints about this series is that I wanted more. I wanted to see more of these gods and more of their powers, what they can do, and what the shamans who are channeling these gods are capable of. I could almost count on two hands the number of shamans that we see in this book. But with 64 gods, like I kind of wanted to see everything else and be like, okay, well, what do like warriors in this world look like for some of the lesser gods? And maybe this is just me being a huge like X-Men anime fan, but I really wish they'd gotten more into that. That's why I loved the CK so much. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But the CK are basically this like elite special ops unit of shamans. They were so freaking cool, and I wanted to spend the entire time like basically just doing a CK adventures. They're like assassins, they're black ops, they do all this like crazy scary stuff, but like it was really cool. And they're all shamans, so I wanted nothing but that for chapters on chapters. One last note on the magic system: the pantheon is what is referred to as like this collective of gods, and the place where the pantheon resides is depicted as this like huge white marble room with like plinths with the different gods kind of residing on each one. It's here that Rin interacts with the Phoenix, and just the visuals that RF Kuang is able to summon when discussing this are super, super cool. So now let's talk about the writing style of the Poppy War Trilogy. And it's complaint time. The first half of the first book, The Poppy War, felt to me like it was extremely tropey. Don't get me wrong, I'll eat up like academy settings, fish out of water characters, broadly speaking, underdog narratives wherever possible. And this is I think I'm not alone in that. Like, this is the reason why books like Harry Potter are so popular. In the Poppy War, it was so prevalent that it was almost distracting at times how much like kind of these tropes were apparent. There were bits and pieces that I saw redeeming in like the first act of the Poppy War and Rin's story specifically. Like her determination to succeed being so aggressive that she gets a hysterectomy and drips hot candle wax on her skin to stay awake while she's trying to study for her classes. So this unprecedented single-minded pursuit of the protagonist Rin, paired with the Chinese history and influences, does lend itself a lot to keeping the first act fresh, but the tropes were a lot. Beyond the first act, since I'm technically speaking about the series as a whole here, my favorite thing about Kuang's writing style was how she handles character interactions. Rin and Kite have probably my favorite relationship in the book. Kite gets introduced fairly early on once Rin gets to Sinigard. He's sort of like this strategic, like sharp, like mental, while Rin is more of the powerhouse. That dichotomy was really fun to me. The other relationship I thought was so fucking cool was the relationship of the trifecta with each other, which gets explored in The Burning God and the third book in the trilogy. I won't go into any details at risk of spoilers, but trust me, it's worth holding out for. There are tense relationships like Rin and Alton that are very multifaceted. Love, hate, pleasure, pain, all kind of mixed together into this weird cocktail of emotions. And I think that's way more reflective of how real relationships go versus what I've seen other authors write before. Again, using Rin and Alton as an example, these emotions and kind of everything layered on at once definitely aren't as easy to palate as a reader as maybe like other kind of more simplistic friendships which get displayed in other series. But I think it was one of Kuang's biggest strengths. It kept me really invested to see how these relationships and characters played out. So, last question, should you read the Poppy War Trilogy? I would say if you're a fantasy fan, absolutely at least check out the first book. If you like books about wars or military conflicts and you don't mind a little bit of fiction now and then, yes, I would say absolutely read at least through book one, again, just to see if you like it. If you need a likable protagonist, I might skip this one. Rin's an anti-hero through and through from the end of book one, basically onwards. And if you can't deal with like that conflict within the main character, she might not be for you. If for whatever reason you can't get down with female protagonists, then I would say skip this book and skip this trilogy. But do consider trying to read some more stuff. I think you're going to open the door to so many good books once you start reading female-driven series. The Poppy War trilogy is a phenomenal example of one of these. On the whole, this trilogy is definitely a recommend for me, though. At least the first book, and then make up your mind from there. Anyways, that's the Poppy War trilogy. Thanks for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to the Guys Can Read YouTube channel, and stay tuned for more book reports.